My old car's name was Sasha.
Or like sometimes he's like, in your idea, do door plot, and I'm like, if you would just practice that, and you have some sample pieces, you would probably just information. Sometimes though, I get really interesting questions where I'm like,
Connected on LinkedIn, whatever that means. Vice president of some financial.
you don't need to. I was like, you don't need to.
Familiar, like, but like old school familiar, like maybe like high school. Well, actually, I don't have LinkedIn on this. You have his, my phone was turned on, so.
Because there's a developer that's like,
Yeah, he connected with me on LinkedIn and we started talking about. I thought I might know him from here.
Yeah.
and then he has all the
But I don't.
What was he talking about? That
He was asking about test automation and stuff, so I mean nothing out of the ordinary. But I thought he might know what I did.
Yeah.
He was asking. He asked like he hadn't read my LinkedIn profile, but yeah.
Yeah, it's obviously very really.
So it's kind of like, so you know what I'm doing, but you just don't. You haven't read my LinkedIn profile. I'm like, I'm not.
Very random if somebody just picked you out of. Everyone's got to talk about
It's just
that.
like, so I mean, maybe he just glanced at it, but not enough to really. Yeah.
It's garbage. Like, this is like literally the worst thing I've ever done. It's like,
Yeah.
I think maybe yeah. So I met him. I did a. He's actually so. He did a general assembly panel for me. But you don't want to follow that company here that just got bought by Goldman Sachs. That's how he ended up at Goldman Sachs. I've only met him that one time though.
Is that a rail shop?
Go.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I was wondering. I am looking around right now, and so it's kind of one of those like.
Yeah. I mean, it could be a. Well, unless you don't want to go through
At this point, yeah, and that's exactly. He's like, yeah, we can go, and I'm like, yeah, no, it needs to be Ruby at this point. So.
I don't know if they have some review. I don't know. The panel was just more on like life after. What it's like to work in that kind of thing. I mean, yeah.
I was just curious if I'd actually met him or it, but it sounds like he just was groping around has thought of you.
am I crazy?
Yes, I know.
I'm not saying.
Alright, let's move the opposite.
This is smart.
Are you babysitting today?
Yes. get started. So if you could, feel free to grab some pizza while we're still doing the intro announcements. Grab some pizza, refill your drink, grab a seat, and we're gonna get started. So first of all, welcome. If you've never been to Austin on Rails before, or how many of you this is your first time coming to Austin on Rails? Awesome! So many newcomers. Welcome. We're very glad to have you. So we meet every fourth Tuesday of the month. I always switch it with third and fourth, but fourth Tuesday of the month, rain or shine, right here. And typically this is our agenda for the night. We have announcements right now. Then we're gonna do a talk. After that, we do a break and a raffle. Today we are raffling a couple of books from O'Reilly, and then also a free ticket to the Alamo Draft House. So we're gonna be doing that during the break. And then after that, we're gonna have our second talk of the night. And then once that's done, we're gonna walk over to BD Riley's for what we like to call socialization practice, which means we buy you a beer and you have a beer with us, and we all are happy and talk about how awesome Rails is, or isn't. No, it's really awesome. So that's how it's gonna go down. First, I would like to thank our sponsor, Live Oak Technologies, for buying us pizza. Ben, I'll have you say a few words during the break if you want to talk a little bit more about what you guys do. I know you guys are hiring. So one of the things that we also like to do during the break is if you're hiring or looking to hire, we'll designate a space so you can go and talk to people and see if you can find a cool job. We would also like to thank our socialization practice sponsor, Own Local. They are huge supporters of our meetup, and we definitely couldn't offer you guys free beer without their support, so thank you, Own Local. They are also based out of here in Capital Factory, so if any of you see any Own Local people, say hi and say thank you. And lastly, we are on Slack. So if you are interested in joining our Slack community, it is austinonrails.slack.com. You might need an invite. It's not exclusive or anything. We don't vet you. We just need your email and we'll send you an invite. So if you are interested, feel free to talk to me or talk to Britt over there. He can also get you an invite. Or just tweet at us at austinonrails and DM us your email. Don't put your email out on the public internets. Just DM us your email. We'll add you to our Slack. It's pretty awesome. You can post jobs or ask for help or just participate in the general community chatter. All right. So without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and start with our first talk, which is Ask a Code School Grad. To just set the stage up a little bit, I had some requests from members of the community about hey, we're getting a lot of grads from code schools and we don't know much about them. Code schools are still kind of new to Austin, even though there's 8 code schools now here in town. So some members of the community that have been around for a little longer are intrigued about what code school grads can do, what their experience was like, why go to a code school, and what sort of support from the community are you looking for as a code school grad. Those were some of the questions that people from the community were asking about. So I thought that I would put together a panel with some code school grads so that we can just have a conversation about this. So at this time, I would like to ask our lovely code school grads to come join us. And we're gonna have to share mics. So one thing that I did want to say before we get started, so obviously I just said that there's about 8 code schools in town. We only have 3 people up here. Why? How come? So one thing that this panel is not. This is not a panel to advertise any code school over another. So I didn't go out and seek one representative from each code school, because again, like this was more about like having a conversation with grads that I know that have attended a code school and are awesome, and I kind of wanted to like showcase how awesome they are, because I think that they're good examples of what a good code school can sort of turn out. But then also I tried to focus on programs where I knew Rails was taught, because more and more code schools are not necessarily focusing as much on Rails. Like for example, I think early Maker Square had a Rails component, but it no longer does. I think it's mostly like JavaScript. Galvanize has a whole Python data science program. I was talking to someone from there, and he was like, oh yeah, I just, Rails was not part of the curriculum, but I taught myself because I wanted to learn something new. So it's like a lot of code schools are kind of moving towards like different technologies, and they're just touching on Rails. So I wanted to invite grads where I knew that like Rails was part of the curriculum. So that's kind of why we only have 3 instead of like a representative from each school. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's start with some introductions. So just tell us your name and what you do currently.
Sounds good. Since I have the mic, I guess I'll go first. My name is Karen Garcia, and I did General Assembly's Web Development Immersive Program, or WDI for short. It's a lot of acronyms there. And yeah, I'm currently contracting with a local Austin Rails shop called Warmer Cloud. They're awesome. And I'm also TAing for UT's boot camp. They don't teach Rails. It's all JavaScript. And so, yeah, without further ado, here's the rest.
Hi, my name is Michelle Vatsenrod. I went to the Iron Yard, which had a Rails backend immersive program, and I work for Academic Works. I'm a service engineer, so so I'm on an engineering team, but I am kind of like tier 2, so I deal with bug bashing and that kind of stuff, and it's been a really great ride, because I don't know if you asked to talk about what we used to do, but I spent 17 years in higher education and decided that I didn't want to do that anymore, and tried to figure something else out that was difficult, and so this really fit the bill for me.
My name is Claire Glinka, and I currently work at Return Path with Susie.
So the next question is about sort of like your past, like where you come from. So I would be curious to know, like, you mentioned you have 17 years of experience in higher education. Well, what was your background after that? Like, what did you study in college? Or did you go to college? What did you study?
All right, cool. So, yeah, I am a Longhorn Hook'em. Graduated class of 2013. I did international relations in German, so es gibt jemand, der Deutsch spricht. Und uns, ja, super. Then, yeah, we're gonna get along. And so, yeah, I decided to do that because I love languages and cultures, and I had this silly dream that I worked for the or the State Department, I should say. And then I figured out that every 2 years you move to another country and you have no say in that. So I'm like, nah, I like to, make my own path. And so, yeah, shortly after graduation, I worked for Apple in the IT Spanish department. It was a mix of translating and customer service. So that was fun. It was, a good employer and, a lot of opportunities there, but a bit too corporate for me and too slow moving. So while I was at Apple, I decided to, start teaching myself, and before you know it, took a full-time course, and here I am, developing in Rails and Ruby. Yay!
Like I said, I worked for Brown University, which is in Providence, Rhode Island, for a long time. And I did not do anything in college related to that career. I did not graduate from college in 2013.
It's okay, neither did I.
So I moved to Texas a couple years ago, and I left Brown. I moved to Texas a couple years ago and decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And when I went to go do my resume, I was like, oh my God, I haven't done anything like difficult in a long time. And I realized that I didn't have any digital skills at all. And so I just started teaching myself like HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and I hated JavaScript so much. Hated it. And so somebody said, don't give up on programming, try Ruby. And so I did, and I really loved it. And so I did a bunch of self-teaching for a while. And I have 2 kids that are young, and I looked into computer science programs, and that just was not realistic for me where I was in my life. And so I looked into some code schools, and I joined Women Who Code, which if you're not a member of Women Who Code and you identify as a woman, I strongly suggest that you get in touch with them and maybe go to some of their meetups, because they were really instrumental in making me believe that I could make it all work and actually do this. And so here I am now. That's where
So my background is actually in biology. That's what I did in college, and I even decided that it would be a great idea to do a master's, which is how I ended up in Texas. During the course of that, I decided academia was not for me, and I was working as a lab tech at UT for a couple of years, and kind of trying to decide like what was I going to do with my life. And so I had a little bit of exposure to like super basic coding during my master's. If anybody's used R, that was like my introduction to programming. It was very exciting. And so I was like, well, this is interesting once I understand like what a for loop is and does and like how to make it work. So I did like a little self-teaching, and then the funding for my position was running out. And so the what am I going to do next took on like a little bit more urgency. And so researching kind of like the different options, using online resources, code schools, and then I heard about this program called Makersquare, and at that point they hadn't graduated a class yet, but I talked to some people and decided to take the leap, and the timing all worked out, so I did the Makersquare program, and this October is going to be the 3 years since then.
Awesome. So the reason why I asked, like, I'm really fascinated by like what you did before you decided to go to code schools. Also from the perspective of a lot of people think like, well, I was not a computer science major in college, and I feel personally that, I mean, I don't know, a lot of my friends who are programmers also were not computer science majors in college, so I feel like it's still a valid path if that's just not what you decided to do. I don't know, that could probably be up for debate, but I mean, I do find it fascinating. Like, I have friends who are also like, you know, were biology majors, and then after they graduated they decided, oh, I kind of really like making websites, and then that's what they ended up doing. So I feel like there are so many different paths that you can take for a career in tech that I always find it interesting to see how people kind of got started. So I'm interested sort of in also understanding like why coding and what sort of appealed to you about that career. You can start. Switch things on.
Well, it appealed to me because it was interesting, because it was challenging, because it had better job prospects than a master's in ecology really offered me. And while I still loved biology and did like my job a lot, I was also starting to realize that a job that required 16-hour days outside in the Texas summer was maybe not like sustainable long-term either, so like, yeah, I don't know. Stuff that would be fun where I could easily find a job.
All right. So yeah, for me, if you can't tell, I'm a very ambitious person, and so yeah, what really appealed to me about coding and programming in general is that whole satisfaction of building something on your own, building something from nothing. That is the most like enticing thing that I've ever felt. Like, you know, when I still recall my early days when I first. July 1st, 2013 is when I first created my Codecademy account, and you know, I was just like, all right, well, let's see what this is all about, and you know, just piecing things together and making something work. That was a super addictive feeling, and yeah, haven't stopped since then. You know, it was intermittent, my timing when I was working at Apple. It was just like, yeah, every once in a while I'd be like, okay, I'm just gonna take a break. And then, yeah, 2015 was the transitional year, and so, all right, I'm really interested in this and want to make the change, so let's do this full time. And yeah, it's been a really fantastic journey, and yeah, being able to, you know, create something and help others with what I created is really satisfying and awesome, and yeah, that's what attracted me to the field.
So the reason I like programming is because I can make stuff happen. Like, it's cool to mess with data and present it to people in a way that they need it to appear, and it's hard. The biggest thing for me is like, it's challenging. Every day I had a job for a very long time. It was not challenging. I was kind of just writing it in, you know, phoning it in because I had been doing it for so long, and I really chose this because it was difficult and it was interesting. And so there's that part where you're thinking, well, can I do this for a job or is it just a hobby? But I was at a crossroads. I wasn't going to do that old career anymore, and I thought, well, I'll give this a go. But the thing that really was the deciding factor was the support of groups like this. Like I say, I'm from Providence. There's not a lot of meetups there. There's not a very strong tech community there. This city is amazing. I can't compare it to anything else. But from what I can understand, meetups are like the bomb. You meet so many people that are just 100% behind you. And you know, I'm from a different generation. I didn't grow up thinking that computer science was something that I could do. Only smart people did that, and boys. And so I already had this kind of ingrained thinking, like, that's not for me. And then so when I decided, like, okay, I'm gonna change things up and I'm gonna do something challenging, I was like, well, that's pretty challenging. There aren't a lot of women doing that, and I have a daughter, and I wanted her to see that with hard work and the right support network, you can make it happen. And I'm so grateful to Rails, Austin on Rails and Austin RB and Women Who Code, because that's a huge part of making that career transition. If you come with none of this, I don't know how you can do it on your own and really believe that you can get the job done without other people saying, just keep at it, you'll do it, and if you need any help, slack me.
So moving on to what it's actually like being in code school, what was like the biggest sort of challenge that you faced while you were going through the program?
Time management. Like I mentioned, I'm a mother of 2 children, so I had to logistically figure out how to pay my husband back for 3 solid months of not doing anything but going to school, reading, and coding all the time. What it's like, it's not like regular school. It's all day long. We started at 9 o'clock in the morning. School opened at 7, so we were usually there by 7:30. And we had lecture from 9 to 12 and a break. we only had a break because Justin would never give us the assignment until 1 o'clock. So we were forced to have lunch, and then we would have anywhere between 6 to 10 hours of homework. You know, I rarely went home before 10 o'clock at night, but I had a great group that and my cohort was 8 or 9 people, I don't remember, I think 8. A mix of men and women, a mix of all different ages, and all very cool people that really lifted each other up. That's not always the case with classes. I've heard it really runs the gamut. I felt like I was really fortunate to have these people who were like had my back and stuff. So it all felt manageable. It was when I look back at it, I think, oh my God, I would never want to do that again. But that was only the first step. It's not like anybody comes out of those schools thinking like, okay, come and hire me. You know, that is just really just the first step. I think code schools could probably do a better job of letting you know that, because I think some people do come out of there thinking, okay, I'm ready to take on whatever comes my way. Not so much.
Similarly, I think the biggest challenge for me was just the sheer amount of information, and I thankfully had a little bit of practice with grad school, that you work very long hours and do take on a lot of information during that, so that was good preparation for it. But yeah, the farther you get into it, you know how much you don't know, and how far you have to go before you're ready to be employable. So yeah, that's so much information.
Yeah, definitely gonna second that. Yeah, holy shit, so much information to parse through. Just oh my God, what is all this? It was really, that was by far my biggest challenge, was saying, all right, yeah, I taught myself some HTML and CSS and tiny bit of JavaScript, that, logic, yay. But, once you got into the back end of things, that's when it started to get okay, this is out of my comfort zone, didn't really prep for this, and all right, let's get through this. And yeah, fortunately, Ruby does a spectacular job in helping transition those noobs to, actually understand what's going on in the back end. And so, yeah, that was definitely by far the biggest challenge of taking on a coding boot camp, as well as lack of income. But yeah, it was really just being exposed to all these different terms and ideas, MVC framework, and setting up databases and schemas and all that jazz. That was definitely the most challenging part of attending a boot camp and not having that prep beforehand. And yeah.
What was your biggest failure during code school?
Ooh, good question. I guess for me personally, I could have used our teacher resources a little bit more. It was all right, if I'm not getting it, it's because it's my fault and I didn't, get it from the first run through of class. And so, yeah, boohoo, just gotta teach myself. And so, yeah, I think I definitely could have used the help of our instructors, just because, I did go to study groups and, do office hours and whatnot, but even then I was just a little lost throughout certain aspects of the course. And so, yeah, I think I could have been a bit more vocal in regards to things that could have been clarified better for me. Yeah, that's, I think, my biggest failure personally.
I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that question. I didn't reach out when I was working by myself. I didn't reach out quickly enough and did a lot of 11 p.m. slacks to my instructor, who promptly replied. But I think I'm a social person. I like groups. I like to work in groups. I function better that way. And the times when I was working by myself, I think those are my most difficult times, when I didn't have someone to kind of bounce ideas off of and didn't reach out quickly enough.
My biggest failure was probably noping out of JavaScript real fast. For whatever reason, like it just did not click very quickly, and the Ruby part was like, okay, I can do this, and then I'm just gonna keep doing this, and just sort of set the rest of it aside, which, I mean, it's fine at this point, like it's working out, but yeah, I noped out of it real fast.
Totally right there with you. So let's flip things and talk about your biggest sort of aha success moment.
I don't know about necessarily aha moment, but like for our final project, we wrote, me and one of my classmates wrote a Ruby gem, and kind of like when we getting kind of like the structure set up so that it would like do the thing, took like a lot of like bothering our instructors and being like, but no, really, okay, tell us again, like what is supposed to be going on here, because we just don't get it. And then like kind of when we got that like outline set up and it like did the first thing and it like returned the stuff we wanted, was very, very satisfying.
I don't know. I don't really know. There were a lot of little successes that made me feel successful towards the end. I don't really remember having any aha moments that were, there were so many, like every day, like it's like this, right? So you think like, oh my God, I'm a genius, I figured this out, and then I'm a failure, I'm never gonna do this again. No one's ever gonna want me to do this for money. So I don't know. You know, sticking with it was like a huge success too. Like, fuck, there was so many times I just wanted to quit. And I thought, I paid a whole bunch of money to do this, I cannot quit. But also, like I said, you know, I have kids and I didn't want to be like, oh, this is hard to quit, you know. So yeah, that was an aha moment. There's one of those like every couple of days, like, I can't quit, so I gotta do this. But, yeah, and like I said, like this, people were always there telling me like, you'll get it, it'll click. And it did click, but there was no one moment that was like, I'm a developer, I got this.
Yeah, I would say during boot camp there were plenty of mini ahas, but I didn't start getting like real aha moments until I started becoming until I started my TA position. That's when I like explaining it to others and saying, or like, you know, going the day before class or during, like, yeah, the day before class or a week before class and reading over the lesson plan. When I'm just like going through what we're gonna be teaching them, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, okay, so this is what we can do with objects, and you know, just like dumbing it down and, you know, helping others learn what you've been working on for the past year or so has been really fantastic. And yeah, I would say that during this position that I'm currently doing, it's just Tuesdays and Thursday evenings and Saturday mornings, but nevertheless, it really helps solidify what I've been teaching myself and what I've learned during my boot camp. And yeah, I would say the more satisfying and more prolonged or prolific aha moments have been this year for sure.
So moving on to graduating and finding a job, how hard was it, and did you face any challenges as a Code School graduate in the marketplace?
Good question. So yeah, I would say I'm the exception to a lot of good Code School grads, in that prior to taking the course, I did and still do attend a lot of meetups and really solidified my network. And so during my time at the course, the last month, I was applying like crazy. Pretty much every day I was sending out applications to jobs that I wasn't really qualified for, but what I was like, I had to expose myself somehow. And yeah, I had a really good friend who was friends with a hiring manager at a startup in Sweden, but they have an office in the Bay Area. And yeah, he connected us, and then that interview process was a good month or so, but nevertheless, it was really exciting to have done, the coding interview, even though it was via Google Hangouts. Yeah, shortly after graduating, I found out that I got the job in the Bay Area. Unfortunately, the Bay Area is very, very expensive, and I didn't have much leeway in terms of negotiating my package, so to speak, and so I didn't do that. Now, lesson learned, never again. Just because, good God, I'm still recovering from those costs of moving over there. But I would say that most of my peers, it took them a good 3+ months to find their first gig. And it wasn't necessarily always going to be like programming per se, but it was something related to like a support engineer or something along the lines of tech support or whatever. I definitely lucked out. But I mean, wouldn't say lucked out, but I used my resources and persevered and was fortunate enough to have a job outside of right off the bat of graduating. So
Took me 6 months. I had given myself 3 months. Thought for sure I'd have something by 3 months, but I didn't. So I was recruited out of school by a company, the one that I'm working for now, but they did not hire me the first time, and that was kind of a devastating blow, because I really thought, oh, they're recruiting me out of school, of course they want me, but I wasn't good enough. So I just, I didn't know anybody here because I was new to town, and I just really focused on meeting people, and coming to the meetups and getting my name out there and my face out there, and I tried to focus on helping other people, because I didn't have a job, I didn't have anything to work towards, so I just started, going to hack nights and stuff and helping people learn Ruby and do stuff like that. And just by virtue of that and meeting other people, those people introduced me to people, and the networking was what, really, I think, helped me stay sane when I was not working. I coded every single day. I went to all of the meetups that I found interesting. I wrote blog posts, the Twitter thing, I read as much as I possibly could. I only applied to jobs that I really wanted to work at, too, so that was a little bit maybe different than what maybe some younger graduates were doing, but life is too short to work at a shitty job, so I had no intention of, just working somewhere just to get my foot in the door kind of thing. Maybe that's why it took 6 months, but when it turned out that the company that I work for now, they had the same position, they were adding that same position, and so my name came up, and luckily they had seen that I had, kept coding every day and gone to the meetups and kind of, focused on helping myself while helping others, and that's what got me the job. Plus I was technically better by then, so I will say that the market is saturated somewhat with junior developers now, people that have been coming to these schools and hoping for a job right out of school, and first of all, they're sometimes not technically ready, and second of all, there just there isn't an infrastructure in a lot of the companies to support a junior developer. So that was my experience. I'm actually glad I didn't get the job initially, because I wouldn't have met all the people that I met. I wouldn't have gone to coffee with complete strangers several times a week and learned about different companies that use Rails and Ruby. So it's kind of see it as full circle, because I did end up there, but it was difficult. It was difficult. Plus, I hadn't looked for a job in a really long time, so that was all new territory. I mean, the last time I got a job, there was no internet. So, I had kind of dabbled in other things, looked for jobs like intermittently when I was at Brown, but, resumes were different, like LinkedIn, Twitter, all the stuff that I had to like be on top of that never existed before was like a huge learning curve. So I'm really sounding like a dinosaur up here, but that's the truth.
Finding a job was something I was really stressed out about, but it actually worked out pretty well. Again, I started going to meetups and stuff. This was in fact my first meetup.
Yay.
So I started pretty soon in the program, and that's how I got one of my interviews. And then, yeah, being friends with people who made friends easily was also very helpful. So I think I was about a month out when I had my first job offer, but since it was during the holidays, I didn't start till January, so, yeah, I guess it was.
Did you take the first job you went?
Yes, I did.
Just to repeat on the mic in case you didn't hear, and then also for the stream, did you take the first job you were offered?
Yes, yes I did. I had 3 interviews, and one of them went really well, and I think it was the first interview that I actually got the job offer, and then I had another one that went pretty well, but they wanted somebody with more experience, and there was like something internal happening, I think was the message I got, that like they weren't quite ready to hire, but like, so unclear, and then I had a third interview that I kind of bombed because I was sick, and it was like a pair programming interview, and I'm like sick and like coding, and it was really bad, but yeah.
So, what advice or what would you tell a hiring manager? You touched on the fact that like it really does seem like the market right now is oversaturated with junior developers. A lot of them are probably coming from different code schools. What would you tell a hiring manager, as a code school grad who, you know what you know what you don't know, you know that the things that they teach you at code school is learning how to learn. So sometimes it can feel a little bit frustrating to say like, I know things. So what would you say to someone that's either a hiring manager, a recruiter, or someone that's on the other end about sort of like who you are as, like the value that you bring as a junior developer from a code school? Like what would you like to make them understand? I don't know if that's a good way to phrase it.
For me, going to a code school solidified my drive. When I decide to do something, I put my mind to it, and I make sure that it gets done. So I think there's some things inherent, like about people that go to these schools, it takes so much to do. I mean, it's only a short amount of time. Anybody can do anything for 3 months, right? But it does take a lot of stamina, and you do have to learn a lot in a quick amount of time. And so I think it's important to let an employer know, like, this means I can ramp up quickly. But that's only helpful if they have the same understanding of what failure looks like. Like, what does failure look like to you as the hiring manager, you as the VP of engineering? And if that doesn't ring true with what I need as a junior developer and or a beginner, whatever you want to call it, then that's not a good match. Like, that was always my question because I'm interviewing people just as much as they're interviewing me, and I would ask, like, what kind of, how will you bring me up to speed? What does 30 days, 60 days, 90 days look like for you? What's failure? What do you do if failure happens? That kind of thing. So I had a lot of questions around that. People were always very happy to answer that because sometimes they knew the answer and sometimes they didn't. And so that was very telling of a place. Yeah, so, yeah, I that's where I'm at.
So yeah, I definitely want to echo that, and that most of the people who are doing coding boot camps, or just committing themselves to intensely learning one topic or a few languages, normally two, I think is the max that they teach in most boot camps, is that everyone in that environment is super ambitious. They have the drive, they have the motivation, they want to learn, and they have that passion to, take risks and, make that, it's people who are not 100% risk averse, but they want to challenge themselves to really incorporate what they've brought, what they can bring to the table, because most people who are going to code school camps are coming from fields outside of computer science or tech in general, and so I think it's a combination of skills that you can bring to the table besides your basic programming skills. Say you're an educator or you were in higher ed, you know the topic of education, you know how schools are run or how things are going. Myself personally, I thrive myself in I guess cultural learning and languages, and so not always the most helpful things, but nevertheless that's what what I can offer in terms of besides sheer tenacity and wanting to learn, is that I have other aspects that can make me a more well-rounded individual and programmer, and it's just the matter of having the right resources and mentors available for that company to basically help bring those junior devs up to speed and invest in those people to basically do what the company wants you to do. And I think for code school camp grads, one, you're gonna have super ambitious folk. Two, you're gonna have people with other experiences and backgrounds that can help, hopefully, theoretically, help out the company. And three, these are gonna be some of the most interesting people you'll have on a team, I think, especially if my class was any indication of those individuals. So that's what I say to hiring managers and recruiters, is that solid individuals with strong work ethic and interests.
I'm not super sure how to answer this one. So when I was interviewing, I was perhaps painfully honest about kind of where I saw my skill set, and kind of like what I knew I was capable of doing, and kind of like where I was capable of going. And I think that was important, kind of getting both parties on the same level. But then kind of after that, once you've decided okay, this person can initially work out, I think the biggest thing is kind of having that plan for not just the ramp up period, but okay, so what's gonna happen after 6 months? Because I think most code school grads do pick things up pretty quickly, right? They did, however, this short period of time. So once you've kind of brought them up to speed and they've started working and they've improved their skills, kind of what's gonna happen next, and who's gonna help out that process. Have a plan for kind of keeping this person engaged and challenged, because I think that's where a lot of us thrive, and if we're not there, we start looking for other stuff.
Yep, I agree. Can I get a time check real quick? I didn't grab my phone. Cool, so we're just in time for opening things up to the audience. So if you have any questions, raise your hand. Yes.
Who would you recommend not go to a code school?
So just to repeat for the live stream, who would you recommend not go to a code school?
You should not go to a code school if you don't learn quickly, or if you don't think you can learn quickly, and if you don't handle stress or high pressure well. and not handling those things well is fine, but you do have to pick up a lot of information quickly, and it will be stressful, if only like by proxy. Like, it was stressful in that there was a lot of stuff to do, but like, I did grad school and honestly it was worse. So like, I was kind of prepared for that, but it's completely reasonable to not learn well under those conditions, and if you don't do code school.
I don't know, who would, we had all kinds. They're really all backgrounds, all, all education backgrounds, all work backgrounds, all ages. I think it's for anybody who really wants to learn in that environment. If you can self-teach without all that stress, and you're the type that is like, I'm gonna go this alone, and I'd rather than that. I don't think it's for those people. I think it's really impressive when people can self-teach. That's not me. I knew I wasn't gonna be able to go that route, so it worked for me. But I think logistically too, you have to keep that in mind. You're gonna be out of work for a minimum of 3 months. Like I said, it took 9 months between school and finally landing a job. But I know people who are still looking, so you have to have that safety net. And then if you don't get a job doing what you want to be doing, and you have to go and get a different job just to pay the bills, it makes it so much harder to make that transition back to what you had originally planned on doing when you went to code school. So now it's upwards of $15,000 now. It's got to be something you're really passionate about. It's not for pussyfooting around. We had people that like kind of, I guess you would say, failed out of the program, and those people were people that just couldn't keep up, but also who did not have the drive to learn on their own. They wanted people to help them too much, and there was just not enough time to be doing your work and helping this guy who's not doing his job. Keep up.
Yeah, definitely. If you're just doing it for the higher salary, don't go to boot camp. I had a few of my classmates, at least 2, who were just in it for, it's want to get a great salary, and it's like, okay, but you really suck at this, and so, honestly, just don't do it if you don't think you have the passion or the drive to go through the 3 or 6 month program that you're applying to attend, because it just won't work out, and you're going to drag those around you with you. Well, some of them, not all of them, but don't do it for the money. Do it for
Cool.
passion.
You have a question?
Yes.
Let's go first.
Now that
And
you
then
all have graduated, found a job, where do you plan to go from there? What's the next goal?
All right, so just for the live stream, what's your next goal after graduating, finding your first few jobs?
Ja, eine wunderbare Frage. It's a good question. I personally would love to just keep on building up my dev skills, getting to mid to senior level developer position, and then from there probably do product management or project management. I definitely, I'm a social being myself, and so I love working with other people and also applying my knowledge to help others out. And so that's my what entails my hopeful future is continuing to build up my dev skills, and then eventually make the transition to encompass both my that'll complement both my tech skills and interacting with other people.
For me, it's kind of the opposite. Even though I feel like I'm an organizer and I'm a social person, and I think project management would suit me well. I feel like for me that's the easy path, and I want to really try hard to stick with the problem-solving part of development, because it's easy to get comfortable heading towards what is easy, not easy, but what suits you, what suits my personality and stuff, but I have so much to learn that I'm not even looking that far ahead. I'm really looking like 6 months, like, God, I hope I don't break anything, and, just, my goals are very short term. They're to just keep learning, and I want to learn, it's like all the things, right? You want to learn everything, and I need to just stay focused and keep those goals very short for me.
Similar answer, learn all the things. So my job right now is really awesome in that we have a lot of really cool, really complicated, really difficult stuff to work on. And so I've been there for like a year now, and I feel like I'm like barely skimming the surface of like the team I'm on even. So I work with really great people who know a ton, and I learned a brand new programming language. We do like a bunch of like crazy distributed programming stuff, a bunch of email stuff, and I have so much to learn on this team, like do all the things.
Cool. So last question, Jeff, we're in the back.
One of you said something that made me curious. Which of you did 3-month programs and which of you did 6? And what do you think the pros and cons are between the two of those?
All right, so which one did 6 months, which ones did 3 months, and what are the pros and cons to?
I did Early Days Maker Square. It was a 10-week program. That's a ludicrously short amount of time to learn much of anything. So the disadvantage is definitely like it's just like going through it. I was like, okay, so like I know exactly how many more weeks I have left. Like I can't. How is this even gonna work? And so that I think is like the main disadvantage of having such a short program. I mean, the advantage I guess is like you know real quick whether or not this is gonna work out. Yeah.
I went to a 3-month program. Like I said, again, logistics were a big factor for me. I don't think a 6-month program would work for my family, and I had to incorporate that into my decision making, obviously. Also, I was not working when I came to Texas, so not working after code school was not as an immediate issue, but I would think that would be a huge con, as if you 6 months out, you're still going to school and you haven't earned a paycheck. I don't think that's approachable for the average person.
Yeah, so I did a 3-month program, and yeah, that was full time. But the coding camp that I'm currently TAing for, that's a 6-month program, and that's part time, so it's just evening. So it's either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, and then Saturdays it's combined classes for the weekdays. And honestly, I think I would have preferred that instead, just because in a 3-month program, you are just being overwhelmed with a plethora of information. Like, you're not going to be, consistently going back to HTML or or to doing things that you learned the prior week, because every week it's something new. And so you have to hold on for dear life every week to understand what you're currently going through, and then trying to also fortify whatever you've been learning the prior weeks as to where you're currently at. And so I think that a 6-month program, I think Galvanize is the only one that has 6 months full-time. That would have been cool, and especially now that there are actual scholarships, like you can actually apply for a scholarship. So I'm really pissed off that it had to happen this year instead of last year. Whatevs. But yeah, so nowadays I think there's a lot more financial resources. So applying for FAFSA to take a coding class, and scholarships as well. Some institutions offer them, some don't. I think I would have preferred a 6-month program, just because it's definitely, I think, more practical in terms of what you're going to be learning and what you can solidify throughout those 6 months. Or do a 6-month program that's part-time, you don't lose the income, and you learn at your own pace, more or less. But you also have classmates outside of work and class to go over what you're currently learning on the weekend. I think, yeah, I would have definitely preferred a slightly longer term program that wasn't full-time.
Right, well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much. We're gonna go ahead and take a break and do the raffle. So feel free to grab some pizza, get some drinks. How many of you are hiring right now? And how many of you are looking to hire? Or, sorry, that's the same thing. How many of you are looking for a job? All right, so let's use this space over here to mingle for job seekers and job givers. And then we'll do a break. We'll come back. I'll do that.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Good job. I have so many questions. Can I have them for another hour or two?
If not, I'll be at the drinking.
I come from an actual computer engineering program, so for me it's fascinating to be
Me neither.
because I know some of the differences. Obviously, for example,
What's up, man? I got
one
your email.
semester, one class. So 3 months and one class alone, where you're learning if and for loops and stuff like that. That you probably have to learn in like half an hour in a 3-month program. Right? It's just ridiculous expectations that it sets. But also, I'm irritated every single time when people who are hiring are looking for that unicorn.
What's the difference?
Yeah.
In terms of saturation of money. You're hiring people who can find every day, right? Like, it's not like you start hiring one of these completely enormous people if you want a job.
So just a reminder, if you want to sign up for our raffle, we have a Alamo Draft House ticket and a book. So just come and put your name up here.
How do you decide which one you get?
What was that?
How do you decide which one you get?
You can choose which one you want.
Okay. So. So small.
I also graduated from UT.
You're not gonna erase my name, are you?
It's so small.
I did
Thank you.
I love my favorite friends.
Yeah, like using that.
Increasing my odds.
Is that your wife?
Yeah, I know how to read this question. I'm not sure, but I'm sure they're.
They're looking.
I'm like, kind of a little bit upset. I have a question.
Yeah, exactly. Quick turnaround. Yeah, now that I'm getting recruiter emails, it's like, well, I wish you were. I wish you sent me this, like, well, it wouldn't have been super awkward to leave. Right. Now it's like.
Started working at a company called Bar that takes cars. It's like exactly. Regardless, it's a win-win because even if it doesn't work out.
you want me to put your name in? So what did you say your name was? Chad?
Yeah, chat with you.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Are you also a regular? Oh, cool.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's quite a while for me too.
I'm kind of looking for the next thing. I just have consider everybody you guys do.
Cool, that's awesome. That's fantastic. It's mainly a workout kind of sort of a situation. So I used to be really into all the workout apps that are out there right now really suck. And so there's always something that it doesn't do this thing and I wanted to do it. And so I was like, hey, let's build my own. And so I've got a couple people that are working with me on it. Yeah. So the Rails on the back end and on the front end. It's going to be responsive. Google Play, App Store, and Google Play. So I'm really designing it when it's amazing. If you have to do something in JavaScript, like I hate JavaScript, like just because I've done Ruby for so long, and then I get into the JavaScript, I'm just like, this is how you all even like work, like with on a daily basis, I'm dealing with NPM problems. I'm just like, how is this even a thing, right? So.
Großes Thema. Wir haben
Yeah, I really like it.
Wie geht's weiter?
Just the separation is the big thing. Like, yes, you can do an app in Rails that is super separated. It does like turbo lazy kind of like Jack sort of style. But what you just end up with is just like this mess of JavaScript. You don't really have like a good form to like put certain things in, And when you have a client side app that's all in JavaScript, especially with something like Ender, there's a place for everything, and that makes it so much easier to organize things.
So is it
Well, not no. There's lots of logic on problems in the church.
but it has
Yeah, it's just JSON. Now, there's all that configuration, just like Rails. So, if you do something on the Rails side that talks JSON API, and as soon as you spin up the Ember side, it'll automatically do things like, hey, find the host, right, with this ID, and it knows how to go and talk to the API, and it also knows how to transfer that back into an Ember object of the type host that has like
Aber ist auch so, ist das
and it gets better all the time. We're doing came out with this thing that's really cool where it will, let's say you go to a page that has a list of posts, and then you drill into a page and there's a bunch of comments. Ember data, when you go to the show page of the post, it'll say, hey, give me this name, and it'll actually like look it up in the cache. If it has it available in the cache, you just grab it. But then what it'll do is, in the background, it'll go and check the server anyway and make sure that it's up to date, right? If it comes back with something that's different, it'll automatically update the page. Yeah. And then we're just coming out with this thing probably in the next 6 weeks or so. One thing that is that they spend a whole lot of time making different things. Like their RFC process is just insane. Their RFC have like years.
All right, let's go ahead and start wrapping it up. Grab a seat.
Also wir haben tatsächlich mehrere Frauen.
Gonna go ahead and start the raffle. Let's see, it's so exciting to see who's gonna win. Dun, dun, dun. Woo! All right, so you get your pick between RESTful Rails development or Git for Teams. Cool, and then also a free ticket. You should be able to redeem it on the website without fee. Oh, great. And so yeah, you get fun and learning. Woohoo! All right. So we're gonna do announcements real quick and then have a word from our wonderful sponsor from today. So do you want to give our quick announcement?
So I'm here tonight to promote an event that we're going to be doing in October. How many of you all know who Yehuda Katz is? All right, so we are going to be bringing Yehuda to town on October 18th. It's going to be a free event. We're booking out about 150 people to be there. We're going to have great food. It's going to be a fun time. And then after Yehuda gives his talk, we're going to be doing a Q&A with him to talk about pretty much everything and anything, not just development type stuff, like how he got into TC39 and things like that. So if you're interested, and you should be interested, we have a bit.ly link. The short link is AOATX 2016. So bit.ly/AOATX 2016. It will, the situation is if you have a ticket, you can get in. If you don't have a ticket, you're not going to be able to get in. So I would definitely go there right now and get your ticket because we are definitely going to sell out. It's going to be over at TechSpace, over next to the Four Seasons, and it's going to be amazing. So that's it.
What's the date?
October 18th.
October 18th, Yehuda Katz.
And it's a joint meetup between Austin on Rails, Ember ATX, Refresh Austin, and Austin JS.
Cool. All right, so now for a word from
Live Oak Technologies, sponsor. Hey guys, my name is Pete Ron. I am co-founder of Live Oak Technologies. We are an Austin startup here, based in Austin, of course. We've got 8 people now, 5 developers and 3 business guys. I am called the CTO, but don't take that too literally. I do a bunch of other stuff too. I was a developer and now am trying to run the dev team. We got myself, Ben is over here, and Isaac is somewhere in the back if you need him. We are looking to hire. We have gone through Techstars, Barclays Accelerator, FinTech Accelerator in New York. We come back here to Austin. We've got some great companies that are interested in using our software. We're in the FinTech space. We're leveraging a modern browser stack with a Rails backend, doing some really cool stuff with co-browsing and WebRTC. And we're looking to grow the team. So we need good, qualified, senior and junior level developers to come in. We got a great team so far. We are funded a seed stage by 3 VCs and John Hancock and Prudential putting money too. So we got some really good star backers to us. A lot of interest in what we're building. Great product, and now it's about trying to make that to a fruition or a real company. So if you guys are interested, or you know anyone who is interested with a Rails background or front-end JavaScript, we're looking to hire myself, Isaac, or Ben afterwards.
Hey Pete,
Yes.
what's FinTech?
Oh, FinTech. In case you guys don't know, financial technology. And that's where banks, pay young startups to come in and change the way they do business. So used to not happen. It's happening a lot more. It's a really, really good marketplace to be in right now. Yes?
Can you re-enable copy paste on passwords, please, because so that we can use password
That won't happen, unfortunately. So we'll have to work on that one. But any questions or anything for us, please come find us afterwards, and we'd love to chat. All right? Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being our wonderful pizza sponsor. And then also, Ben is pretty active in our Slack, so if you have any other questions and you're not in our Slack, join our Slack, ask us questions. If you have any questions about the job in particular, that would be a great place to follow up as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on our second talk.
Are you already on the? All right, so.
Oh, is it just AirPlay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, Tablet Factory,
Yeah.
and the password is Gabe Boston Hacking. Okay. Right, and then with AirPlay, you're gonna want to join co-working.
Which one?
Co-working.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Cool.
How's it going, guys? My name is Van Anderson. I really love the panel that we had in the first talk. It was really relevant to me because I actually graduated from a code school just about 4 months ago and got hired a month after. I had a great time, an amazing teacher, amazing classmates, and I don't think I could have ever broken into this industry otherwise because the thing I studied in college had absolutely nothing to do with computers. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm here today to tell you why your next app should be 2 apps. And it starts with discussing kind of 2 philosophies for building apps. And here's the first one. Godzilla. Just a big monolithic glob of raw power. He's not very smart, he's not very agile, but he doesn't really need to be. He's really good at smashing things, and that gets him by. This is a legitimate strategy. It works well in a lot of scenarios, and if you've ever seen a Godzilla movie, you know that he's kind of tough to beat. But I think there's something that can beat him, and that's these guys. So growing up as a 90s kid, this was one of my favorite cartoons. Basically followed around these robots as they beat up bad guys and save the galaxy. And each one of these guys is a lot smaller than a Godzilla, but there's 5 of them, so it kind of makes up for it. And right off the bat, you can probably start to think of some advantages 5 smaller units would have to 1 really big unit. They're more agile, they're more modular. If one of them breaks down, there's still 4 left. And they can be all these different places at once so they can execute more sophisticated strategies. But it's not a clear-cut victory quite yet. Because remember, Godzilla is really good at smashing things. It seems like dividing things into these smaller units might sort of compromise some of that raw power. Sort of a situation of trade-offs. But if you know what these guys are, you know that when the going gets tough, they do this.
Who are they?
They connect to each other and they form this one giant badass robot called Voltron. And suddenly, this situation of trade-offs kind of starts to dissolve because they really have the best of both worlds. They have all the agility and modularity of smaller units when they need it, but then also when they need it, they can hook up to each other and have all the horsepower of a Godzilla. Power here is not an opportunity cost of a modular design. A modular design actually creates the power. And we can build apps like this. We can build apps that intelligently divide responsibilities into modular units to gain a strategic advantage and then connect everything together to accomplish really ambitious goals. So how do we do it? Well, I think there's one kind of guiding principle that really lights the way, and that's this, SRP, the single responsibility principle. An SRP is really pretty simple. It's a principle of object-oriented design that basically states that classes and modules should generally only ever be tasked with a single responsibility. And this has a lot of immediate advantages. For one, code becomes easier to read and debug. There's a certain amount of mental gymnastics it takes to decrypt a unit of code that's trying to do more than one distinct responsibility. But when everything in a unit is doing the same responsibility, you can kind of understand them in terms of a common goal and a common purpose. It also becomes easier to locate problems due to limited overlapping of responsibilities. Because if things are organized by responsibilities, it kind of follows that they're not really going to overlap that much. So when something goes wrong at a really high level, you know to go to one thing that controls that responsibility. Lastly, code becomes more modular and maintainable. It's much, much easier to replace something that only does one thing than replacing something that does 2 or 3 things. And conversely, if you want to reuse code and everything only does one thing, you can just cherry pick the thing you need without pulling over any cruft. So this is all really good stuff, but there's one thing I don't like about how SRP is normally presented, and that's the fact that I've normally seen it presented as a principle of object-oriented design, specifically for designing classes and modules. And I think that's a little bit limiting. There's something really interesting I've heard of before that I think applies here called the design fractal. So a fractal is this sort of infinitely repeating geometric object where we can observe the same patterns on both a microscopic and a macroscopic scale. The design fractal basically takes that same sort of principle and applies it to design principles in the design process. So the design fractal posits that we should be able to take a fundamental principle of design, and if it's really fundamental, we should be able to see that play out in these repeating patterns both at a microscopic and a macroscopic scale. And I think SRP is a really good candidate for this. Yes, you should absolutely be using SRP when you design your classes and modules. But if you go down a level to the methods inside of those classes and modules, then it's equally valid. You'll gain the same benefits by using SRP there, and you'll suffer the same headaches by not using it. And you can even go down a level there to individual lines of code. If you've ever tried to read a line of code that was trying to execute more than one distinct responsibility, then you know it's really hard to read. So that's what it looks like on this really microscopic scale. But what about the macroscopic scale of how we architect our applications? What does SRP look like there? Well, the example that comes to mind is actually the applications that I work on for my job. So I work at a research and development branch of Texas State Technical College, and basically what we do is we create software that assists in curriculum alignment and curriculum authoring. And the common thread in everything we do is that we translate natural language into a common set of occupational descriptions and related skill statements. So to do that, we start with big data from the job market, and then we process that data with machine learning algorithms that basically learn a set of facts about that data. And then from there, we can take that set of facts we learned and analyze another document of natural language, whether it's a resume, a job posting, a course syllabus, and we can give you insight to how well that document aligns to the current in-demand skills from a snapshot of the job market. And it's this kind of complicated problem that we're trying to solve, and the solution gets complex really quickly. And we have to have kind of a way to manage that complexity. So here's what it kind of looks like. So we're building this new user-facing app called Calibrate that is basically targeted at higher ed institutions with the purpose of curriculum authoring and curriculum alignment. And to get there, we have to fulfill each one of these responsibilities here, and more. So in order to make things work and not be crazy, we use what's called a microservices architecture, where each one of these bullet points that's a responsibility here is a separate application with a separate code base. And this has a lot of really immediate advantages. For one, we can really strategically decide how to implement each one of these responsibilities without affecting any of the other responsibilities. So we use Rails for a lot of our APIs because Rails is really awesome. But Ruby doesn't really have the type of machine language libraries and tooling that a language like Python does. So for our machine learning stuff, we use Python. and we can make that decision for that specific responsibility without affecting the rest of the responsibilities. We can also scale each service independently as we grow. And most importantly, we can flexibly adapt to new use cases. So right now, we monetize our API service separately to developers and people trying to build applications that are kind of using our special sauce. That's really easy to do because we have this sort of segregated logic for everything. We can let developers use our API without touching the rest of this ecosystem unnecessarily. So from my perspective, and it's the perspective of a junior developer, so a little bit limited, I kind of see things trending towards this more modular, more independent model, more Voltron chic, if you will. And how do you move towards that? I actually don't think the answer is to do everything at once. I think a much better answer is to take really, really small steps. And I think the smallest step you can take here is just to take one application and divide it into two separate applications. And there's a really good dividing line for logic here, and that occurs between your data logic and your presentation logic. So what we can do here is we can take a single Rails monolithic application, and we can split that into two separate applications with two separate code bases. We'll have a Rails API that has all the data logic in it, and we'll have a JavaScript single-page application that has all the presentation logic in it. And these will even be potentially on separate servers. So to understand how these work together, we have to understand what a traditional page lifecycle looks like versus how a single-page application looks like. So here at the top, we have a traditional page lifecycle, and this should be really familiar. So the client will generate a request to the server, and the server receives that request. The server will process through an entire page and send that back as a response to the client. The client then will refresh their browser and display the new page. And that happens on the first time, it happens on the second time, and every subsequent request. SPAs work a little bit differently. So here we have potentially two servers. So in the initial request, it's made to the server that your SPA is statically deployed on. So in this initial request, the client will actually download this sort of bundle of static assets. And this bundle of static assets has all of the assets needed to render pretty much every single page in the application. So then from there, once that client has made the initial request, when they click a link, they can dynamically re-render the page without refreshing from the static assets they have available. If and only if they need some extra dynamic data, they can ping the data API server, and the data API server will give them this small little portable chunk of JSON that they can plug into their static assets. And as you can imagine, this data API server has to work a lot less harder than a normal server because it's only serving up these tiny little pieces of JSON rather than these entire pages. This is an illustration of a little bit more how this plays out. So on the left, we have a static template, the type of thing that would live on the client side. This would have presentation details, and it would also have logic on how the UI interacts with the user. But we really don't want to store our entire database on the client side. We want to keep that on the server side where it's secure in an environment we can control. So the static template and all the static assets live on the client, and when they need details to plug in to these missing blanks where dynamic content should go, they'll ping the server for just this tiny chunk of JSON, and then they'll fill in all the blanks and render the template, and it'll be a complete application experience. So this brings me to the first major benefit of using an SPA, and that's client-side rendering. IKEA is a really, really great example of client-side rendering when you think about it. So IKEA could follow this business model of processing and shipping fully assembled furniture to their clients, but that would be really, really expensive on their end. So instead, they opt for a different strategy. Let's ship these parts to the user, and then we'll have our client use their own manpower to put together that furniture. And the end result is that they save a lot of costs. And when you think about it, the manpower they're using from IKEA's perspective is pretty much free. It would be wasted if it wasn't used. And this is a lot how client-side rendering works between a client and server in our network. the server will ship the client all the pieces it needs to put together the page, and then the client will use its own processing power to put those pieces together. Because we've segregated concerns here, we can put data logic on the server side where it's more secure, and we can outsource presentation logic to the client where it's more efficient. There's a really awesome bonus here, and that is when the client controls the rendering process, it actually owns the page refresh and transitions. And this correlates to not performance, but perceived performance. So where a traditional page lifecycle would basically show a user a blank screen during loading, you can completely control that. You can put in interactive transitions, you can put in interactive loading states, and the user, the end user, will actually perceive that your page is more performant, even if it isn't. Another really big benefit of SPAs is that SPAs build to just static files. So when we have a typical Rails server, every time we get a request, we're dynamically generating files and sending those back to the client. And this is a really neat setup, but it requires a lot of configuration. You have to have all of the right dependencies installed on the server side. You have to have everything set up right, and there's a lot of moving parts. To contrast, when we serve SPAs, we're serving the same bundle of files every single time. So we can actually just put those on any sort of vanilla HTTP server, and it'll work right out of the box. This allows for a lot of flexibility and decentralized distribution, and it makes the deploy process really, really easy. And there's another bonus here. Because they're static assets, many SPAs have packages that can actually build them into a native iOS app or a native Android app. I haven't personally had experience with doing that build, but I have used applications that have been built with those, and it seemed like a great experience. So if you could get that to work, it would be, I think, a pretty incredible value add. Lastly, and I think probably most important, is that using an SPA makes your data logic modular and reusable. So in your typical Rails monolith, your data logic is really pretty tightly coupled to your presentation logic. It's in a really tight contract with that presentation logic. What happens when you all of a sudden decide that in addition to your web application, you want a native iOS app that talks to the same data your Rails app does? Well, if you have a single application, you've probably painted yourself in a corner, because that data logic has a really specific contract with the internals of your Rails app. But when we segregate that data logic, it becomes kind of like this electric outlet. So an electric outlet is completely agnostic to what you plug it into. You could plug a toaster into it, you could plug a laptop into it, and it really can't tell the difference. It has no idea what those things are. An electric outlet has basically one contract, and that is this contract to the standard of how electrical outlets are structured and serve electricity. So when we segregate our data logic, it becomes this just sort of agnostic thing that we can plug anything into. We could plug an iOS app into there, we could plug an Android app in there, a desktop app in there. We open it up to having third-party integrations that can plug in there and do any task that our other apps can do. So those are some of the benefits of using SPAs, but what about the technical challenges? Because there are some. For starters, SEO is a little bit tricky because web crawlers don't actually execute JavaScript. In addition, since you're sending the entire bundle of assets in the first initial request, that request can kind of be pretty slow, potentially. Also, there's a lot of third-party integrations like Google Analytics that rely on the traditional page lifecycle, and having this SPA model that dynamically re-renders can kind of mess that up. But these are all technical challenges that have really clever technical solutions. There's a really big project management challenge to SPAs that's not so easy to circumvent, and it's this. On a fundamental basis, you're making two apps. Two apps in two separate frameworks and two separate languages with two separate backlogs and probably just one team to manage it all. And there's no way around this. Two apps are going to be more resource intensive than one application. There's no sugarcoating that. But I think there is a way to somewhat mitigate that. And my thought is that you have to choose the right framework. And there's a lot of Really, really great choices out there, but I think there's one choice in particular as a Rails developer that you can choose and actually transfer some of your Rails knowledge into. And that's this guy, Ember.js. So here's a little demo of something we'll do just a bit later. We're going to build a to-do list app that's split between two pieces, data API side and an Ember front end. So this is a command that we're going to use to generate the task resource on the Rails side. And I'm sure everyone kind of has some idea what that does. But then we're going to have to generate a corresponding resource on the Ember side. And this is a command we'll run. As you can guess, they do pretty much the same thing. I got a kick out of it when I saw that too. And the implications here are that you can take some of your knowledge as a Rails developer and apply it directly to how Ember works. So let's talk about the Ember philosophy. The Ember philosophy stresses convention over configuration, rapid productivity through boilerplate code, and harnessing open source community contributions to accelerate development. That should sound a little bit familiar to you guys because some of the same people that built Rails also built Ember. Pictured here is, what do you know? Yehuda Katz, who was a core Rails team member and a core Ember team member. So I want to kind of briefly survey some of the high-level architectural similarities between Ember and Rails. So Rails matches paths to controller actions in the router. Well, Ember matches paths to route files in the Ember router. In Rails, controller actions set the data model and render a corresponding view. In Ember, routes set the data model and render a corresponding template. In Rails, data is accessed from a database through a standardized query language, SQL. In Ember, data is accessed from an API through a standardized JSON specification, JSON API. In Rails, Active Record provides an interface for accessing data that provides an abstraction for the low-level details of SQL. In Ember, Ember Data provides an interface for accessing data that provides an abstraction for the low-level details of structured JSON or JSON API. So I think these last two concerning the data are really key to understanding how Ember works versus how Rails works. So if you can imagine your typical default Rails app, it connects to a SQL database, probably a Postgres database. And the Postgres database can do a lot of things, but it kind of does a few core tasks. You can create records, you can update records, you can destroy records, you can get a bulk index of records, or you can get individual records. So on the Ember end of things, instead of connecting to a SQL database, Ember connects to an API, a data API. And it seems like that's a lot different, but when you think about it, the data API does basically those same core tasks. You can create records, you can update records, you can destroy records, you can get a bulk index of records, or you can get single records. The trick is how they talk to each other. So in Rails, Rails talks to the SQL database using SQL, which is just the standardized query language. We also have this active record layer on top of that that allows us to circumvent SQL, and if we're doing like the most default usage, we don't actually have to know much about SQL. And Ember is a lot the same, except instead of SQL, we have this JSON specification called JSON API that we'll see in just a bit. But then on top of that, Ember Data provides us a layer to where we don't really have to know a whole lot about JSON API. It all happens under the hood. So this is a little snippet of JSON API. And JSON API is geared towards communicating resources between applications. So with that in mind, you can kind of look at this structure and infer a lot about where things go. We know that resources have types. We know that they have IDs. We know that they have attributes and even relationships to other resources. And there's a place for everything here. So, like I said, you don't have to actually understand how this works because Ember will put this under the hood. But it's useful to know what's going on. So, I think that a lot of this will kind of start to become more clear when we build something. So we're going to build a simple to-do list app. And this app is actually going to be split into two separate applications. A Rails backend that serves JSON API and an Ember front end that consumes that Rails API and gives us a nice interface. So this is the basic setup for getting that Rails app started out. Rails new to do API. If you use the API flag on there, it will actually trim out a good bit of fat. And then we're going to generate our resources and configure our models to have a has-many relationship between list and task. So next, we're going to install this gem called JSON API Resources. And if you've used Active Model Serializer before, this is very, very similar to it, except it gives us even more boilerplate stuff to work with. So there's 3 easy steps to configuring this gem. First, we're going to generate and configure the serializers. Then we're going to add route helpers, and then we're going to add controller modules. So we can generate the serializers by running these 2 commands up here, Rails G JSON API resource task and Rails G JSON API resource list. And this will give us empty files right here, but they're filled out with a little bit of configuration. And this is actually a part that can get fairly complicated. JSON API resource gem has thought of just about everything you could ever want to do with CRUD tasks. There's a lot of things you can set in here, a lot of overrides you can set, but we just need this basic setup right here with attributes and model relationships. So then, once you have that set up, you're going to add these route helpers on. Our resource generators got us these resources route helpers, but we need the JSON API resources route helpers. So then we just add these modules into our controllers for our resources, and we're done. Also, we can add some seed data to test this out. Just creates 30 lists, and then we can ping it in Postman, and we can see we get pretty much the same format block we saw in that sample, correctly formatted JSON API. So that's the back end. Let's build out the front end. To start a new Ember project, as you might guess, we do something similar to what we do in Rails. We call this command Ember new and then the name of our project, and it gives us this sort of file structure, which shouldn't look too unfamiliar. It's got models in there, it's got templates in there, it's got a folder for controllers, config folder, test folder, public folder, a lot of the same mappings that we see in Rails. So the first step is to generate model files, and we'll use this using the resource generator, just like we did in Rails. And the result is something that you could probably read and pretty much infer what it does. Obviously, we're in JavaScript, so the syntax is not as nice as Ruby, but this command ds.adder sets up our attributes, ds.belongs to, ds.hasmany sets up our model relationships. And then also in that resource generator, just like Rails generator does some routes, this Ember resources generator generates us some routes. And this is a really great place to kind of talk about how Ember glues everything together. So in Ember, in the router maps paths to route files. Then route files load up and they grab data from the data API server and prepare that data to be presented in the template. Then the route file will match with an associated template file of the same name and make that model available to be rendered on the template. So we're going to do a little bit of a non-canonical implementation here to avoid route nesting in Ember, because route nesting is a little bit more complex in Ember than it is in Rails. This is a basic step we're going to do. First of all, we can delete the task from there because we don't need a task show page. We're going to map /lists to this list route file, and we're going to have that be our lists index. Then we're going to map this /list ID to a list show route that we're going to generate in just a second. Notice that we're using the same dynamic URL segments that we do in the Rails router. So here we're going to generate our route list-show, and that will also create us an associated template. So now we can configure these routes. And this is the empty file we get. So to configure the routes, we need to grab data from the data API. And we do that in a special function of an Ember route called a model hook. So basically, we call this function and it returns a value, and that value will be available to us in our templates. And we can see here that it actually looks pretty intuitive. And this .store is how you call Ember data. So we call this .store.findAll and pass it the model name of list. And then under the hood, Ember will actually generate an AJAX request to our data API. It'll grab the response from that data API, and then using the configured models in our the models that we configured earlier, it will put that response into an object that's easy to interact with and easier to interface with, much like the Rails active record ORM. So for the list route, we're going to get an index of lists by calling findAll. For the list show route, we're going to get a single list record by calling findRecord, passing it a model type of list, and grabbing this list ID dynamic URL parameter that we specified in the router. So after the routes load up, then they'll be matched to associated template files of the same name. And this is kind of the fun part, because the handlebars template syntax, oh, there we go, I think is really a lot similar to the Rails ERB. And one of the projects I had this month at work was to convert our marketing page, our Marcom page, from a Ember app to a Rails app. And one of my primary tasks was just changing these double curly braces to ERB brackets and moving around a few syntax elements. So you can look at this side, this is our list index, and you can probably quickly infer what it does. So we're going to use this each helper to iterate through model, calling each element list, and then link to each list.name, linking to the list show page and passing in this list object for context. So this model variable contains the return value of our model function from the route file. And on this side, remember our model function returned just a single record. So we can call model.name to get the name of that record for the show page, and then we have two columns here, a not done and a done column. We can iterate through model.tasks because that model includes all of the associated relationships, and we can properly sort the tasks as either done or not done using the unless and if helpers. So we're almost done here, but we want some ability to add and, well, I guess check off tasks once they're done. So to do that, we're going to use an action helper on the show page. And that's defined with this little bit of code right here. So we call the action helper, and then we pass it the name of the action we want to call and any arguments that we want to pass to that action. So then we have to define this action finish task. And we do that here in the list show route. We just put the function right here in the actions object, and it takes in an argument of a task. It'll set that task equal to done, done equals true, and then it will save that, which again, using Ember data, generates the AJAX request to update the data API server. And then we're done. So now we can run this and sort of test this out. So here, we'll run a Rails server using Rails S, and this will boot to localhost 3000. Over here on the Ember side, we can run Ember S to boot the Ember server, and then proxy to localhost 3000 so it knows where to get the data. So when we run it, it looks a little bit like this. And pay special attention to this right pane where the Rails server console is. Look at the response time, between 5 and 10 milliseconds, which even for a stripped down app like this, I think is pretty dang fast. You can also see the UI is really, really snappy and really responsive. So that's why, in my opinion, your next app should be 2 apps. For further resources on Ember, I would recommend 2 books. The first is on LearnPub. It's Ember CLI 101. It's a really, really great first book. It doesn't assume any prior knowledge. A really good second book I found is this Ember.js cookbook. It gets a little bit more advanced, but it still starts from the place of a beginner, and I thought it was a really great second book. So my name is Van Anderson. I have sort of a half-finished portfolio website here at vanderson.io. If you have anything that you think I missed, anything interesting you're doing with SPAs, or just any questions about anything I said, I would love to hear that.
Maybe I missed it, but what made it move the task move from the top list to the bottom? Did you show that code? Did I miss that?
Yeah, so that was the action called finish task. So,
but didn't that just update the record?
Yeah, no, that's awesome because Ember does things magically under the hood, just like Rails. Cool. So yeah, we called finish task and we passed it the task object, and then we set the value of done on that task object equal to true. And then under the hood, Ember figures everything out, how to re-render the page, and yeah, so
where you define those lists, it said undone up here, done here.
Yeah.
Once it's flipped, it just moved it.
Yeah, because we had that template set to render the undone list, the undone tasks in the undone column and the done tasks in the done column. So Ember magically figures everything out, which is really intimidating starting out because just like Rails, it does a lot for you. So it's a little bit confusing to figure out, what magic is happening under the hood. Yeah?
Would the resources you provided provide answers to the tricky SEO?
No. That's actually a really tough problem. The SEO issue is solved by a Ember library called Ember Fastboot, but right now it's kind of in that sort of initial stage where it's not really ready for production, and that's what we faced when we were trying to migrate our Marcom from Ember to Rails. Should we use Ember Fastboot? Well, it's probably not ready for production now, so for now we'll migrate to Rails, and yeah, so, yeah.
What type of feature do you think Ember has compared to React in terms of use?
That's a really good question. So he asked, what type of feature set does Ember have when you compare it to?
Future.
Oh, future. Okay. Well, it starts with understanding that they're kind of almost apples and oranges because Ember is a framework and React is a library. So with React, you don't get this giant scaffolding that you do in Ember. So that's sort of one part of the conversation. And then this other part of the conversation is this sort of object-oriented paradigm versus the React paradigm, which kind of goes towards immutable states. I actually think the sort of paradigm going towards immutability is going to kind of win out over the object-oriented paradigm eventually. But I don't know. It's a really interesting question. The Ember community, though, is just like the Rails community. Really, really awesome people, really, really friendly to newcomers, and really community-oriented towards finding community solutions for things. So, who knows? Good question. Yeah?
Does Ember provide affordances for creating reusable front-end components, or is that
Yes,
something?
absolutely. There are components in Ember. Not only components in Ember, but Ember add-ons, which you can install in the command line. You just do Ember install, and then your package. And yeah, there's a lot of push towards generating community solutions with reusable components. And of course, you have access to all the node packages and all of that stuff. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
When you showed the example of the route files, I think.
Yeah.
Do that have to be? There was very little going on there.
Yeah.
Because is it only in the examples? It's generally the case.
I mean, if you're doing something really complicated, it fills out pretty quickly.
Okay.
But it's interesting to note the stuff I had going on in the route file. Well, I took a non-canonical approach, so I'm not sure it would have worked out. But typically, the stuff I put in there is actually optional because it's sort of a default use case, and Ember will automatically do that for you without doing it. So I think we could have almost gotten by with blank route files, and it still would have worked because, Ember is magic, just like Rails. So, Cool. Well, thank you so much. This was my first talk I ever gave. I really appreciate y'all being supportive. Thank you so much. My name's Ben Anderson. I've got my portfolio up at vanderson.io. So if you think of another question or you just have a project or want to reach out in any way, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. And if you were wondering about what code school graduates can do, I mean, that's a great example. So we're fast learners. All right, well, thanks so much for coming out tonight. We are gonna go ahead and move to socialization practice over at BD Riley's. Does everybody know where BD Riley's is? Is this your first time going? Okay, so there's gonna be a bunch of us going. Jeff, are you going to socialization practice?
Sure. Twist my arm.
Can I designate you as the Let's Follow Jeff person? Okay, awesome. So yeah, just follow the group. If you get lost, don't worry, just go down to 6th Street and then turn to the right. And it's just gonna be like...
To the left.
Google it.
Oh,
Google it.
sorry, to the left.
Google it.
And it's gotta be right there, so...
Follow the crowd.
Short walk. All right, well, thanks so much, everybody.
I have like 3 customer support. Still it's not really worth it, right? I don't get it.
I mean, if you like already know how to like,
Yeah. I was paid to
yeah. So like,
sorry.
no,
Yeah, you
Yeah. Well, no, I know, but like I haven't like my problem is like I'm having these interviews and it's like. It's like, I make it. Like, what do you want me to fill it? Like, biz buzz, that's what I want to talk about. Like, and also, that's what I think is like perfect in. It's like, hey, like, that's,
that was actually.
So trust me, I just bombed one the other day. And it's just like, I'm like we need to talk to see face to face. And like, softball question, and I just like completely like, and then like progressively, all the questions like, I know the answer. And it's like, yeah, it's like, what's the difference between a C or a B? I was like, I know this, but I am so freaked out right now. I have no idea. And like, after I was like. You have to static versus dynamic. It's like, and I was just like, it was like this. It was just like, anyway, like when you said you had a good one, you had a bad one, you had a good one, I was like, oh man, I know exactly what she's doing.
Yeah, no, I would, like, you do potentially get like some good connections, but in my experience,
And like, I'm currently in San Antonio. I drive up here. Like, I think I finally just know. It sounds like you have to move up. You have to like we're close enough, but we're not.
Yeah.
I have to like drive back.
My brother lives in San Antonio, and he used to work there, obviously.
For Rackspace?
No, he...
USA.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the problem too, is that I thought like, oh, the tech community is probably spillover from people from Austin. No, there's not. Like there's actually people that live in San Antonio that drive up here every day and emails and words.
No. He ended up having to take a remote job, working for a company in Dallas, and then he works remote most of the time, and then like maybe 1 week out of the
Close enough,
quarter.
yeah, be close enough to drive.
Yeah, so because like it's just not there. If you want to do like .NET, like
corporate stuff.
Exactly.
And trust me, like I looked around there and it's like it sucks. Like I have to I never really make that jump.
Also, like,
tomorrow we're gonna be asking questions about this. Yeah, it is. And that was my first technical interview in 3 or 4 years. And I also too, like I have no community because like just up here, it's like it's your network. I have no network here or inside of Toronto. When I want to go back to my network, it's all in like San Francisco, and like she said, it's crazy expensive, and especially
I have to teach it the next day, so
you got 3-year-old, 3 years out of date guys. So did you learn Go at this company?
I did, yeah.
When you said I learned a new language, and you said she learned Go. So
I
that's my thing. Is
I
like,
did.
That
they,
is really
no, because
Yes.
it's. I mean, everything's going to Go. Everything's going to Go back end, React front end, and but luckily Rails has a great API, so I think there's like going to be a ton of Rails stuff. Because like my job for like 2 years was doing a great API, so using the project. By the way, there's a very well run meetup.
Oh, thank you.
I used to run one in Vegas. So.
Oh, cool.
It's
It's tough.
You got a little bit of
no, I mean my thing is when
Oh,
really challenging. Or should we do it with all the extra features? Should we do it as something?
probably homeless
If you
guys on the street.
take it.
Will not. You know what, I'll make take it. Now what?
Like, really. Yeah, we can definitely combine.
I may take 2 pieces from my son.
2 pieces, just take 2 whole.
No, I don't want to take the whole thing, I don't eat that. He'll eat this.
You said son, so like they're scared of everything. Do you want a pepperoni?
I'm gonna take 2 of those.
Oh, right behind you. The empty ones are right behind you.
I'll take 2
And then, do you know any shops right here that do
I'm not gonna lie, I've been like kind of burned out.
There is some assistant here for Meetup that I've been like assistant recently.
Yeah, some meetups occasionally do. I just really want to know is like when you do code, but like if you like, you're not a jerk.
So seriously, they started up a chapter in Vegas. Where are you guys? Right? So like, you know, this is what we do. You don't want to. It was like, we're just here to like lend support, like
Yeah.
you guys doing such a, and like that.
Really depends on the group.
Oh yeah,
I
exactly.
run girl development and we don't care.
No, I agree, but like, I know why you said that.
The girls' development's too great for us.
Yeah, it's actually a national nonprofit and we offer classes for women to learn. So we're not like a meetup in the traditional sense, we literally just like offer courses throughout the year.
Okay, yeah.
Got it, and then, 6 months.
But anyway, it just like, it really depends on the group. And I have heard that from other men, and I
I
believe
completely
that.
understand, because like that's the thing that,
Let's just start out with, you're fine.
but yeah.
I know, it's pretty cool, huh?
Really went slow and then it went fast. And we did pizza.
We usually just throw stuff away and then. Oh, yeah, I wanna go down.
Oh, yeah. So should we carry these out and see if the people walk?
I was just gonna, give that over here.
Yeah, let's get.
Are you guys looking to hire like a contract or like a full-time?
We're mostly interested in full-time.
Full-time?
Yeah, I think we could accommodate contract if that's something that you want to do. Our preference is, having had contracts for a while, we prefer to start with people who are invested in.
In the team long term. Okay, and also I guess like what traits are you actually looking for in this role for the person that you want to hire?
So it's going to be important that the candidate have some exposure to Rails and JavaScript. Ideally, Rails I think is a little bit more important for these people. JavaScript a little bit more important for this people.
else here.
Anything else you need done?
Yeah, I'm good.
Unglorious parts of being ordered. Small bucket pizza. That's a really good presentation too.
Yay! I'm glad.
Did you help them prep?
No.
Hey, that's good news. Yeah.
You gotta go push that code.
No, man. Yeah. Nice.
Alright, I'm gonna head over to Beauty Ready. Cool. Thank you so much for coming. Let me know if you need anything else.
Beautiful today, though. I just realized he's
Cool. Okay. Who did you meet? You meet you guys? Okay. I wasn't sure if I could pick up with the big beard.
No, no, yeah. He's a mid-level grad, but has some interest in commercial browsing,
Yeah. Yeah. TJ just came out of a Rails-centric camp right? Grad school. But it sounds like he has 2 or 3 years of prior sort of technical experience from that. So he didn't come into it like as a makeup. So anyway, he's gonna send me over his makeup stuff.
Yeah, yeah, so I know what you're doing. I imagine you end up with the
Yeah. But if we can reach a decision on his papers as soon as we can, we've already talked to some people
Yeah. So far, I really enjoyed theirs.
I haven't talked to him yet, so we'll see.
Figure out how we get one.
I'm gonna play puppy report for you guys.
That's great.
It's easy or whatever.
And just because it's really the technical side of stuff. And feel free if we can get maybe Steve involved with you guys kind of tag team, like Meetup.
Yeah, I don't know. The last time we did that, I was a little bit dissatisfied. I felt like Steve, and really when all did my time, but like, I think I mentioned something with Steve.
It wasn't him.
Tom.
Yeah.
It was like, I felt like they didn't really press me.
They weren't.
It was like Steve,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, they weren't pressing it.
Um,
And we haven't pressed people on stuff.
Right.
Because I couldn't. Now you can.
Yeah.
Steve could have. He didn't really want me to the overall thing code standards.
Yeah, yeah. So that's fine. But I'd like to get on how we were doing first, sort of grading, like hire you after, what are we after? If that all matches up, then going to a technical interview.
Yeah. That's been our.
Or just an evaluation.
That's great. This all basically then we'll hand the technical interviews off to you and what you want to add in there. And we'll continue to be kind of first off. Yeah, it's an overall fit. You know, they're nice enough. I can work with them. I've got the general skill
it since the event's over.
If we work, could we stay?
What's that?
If we work, could we stay?
If you were members, you could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I still feel like it's coming.
Can't do it, man. Sorry. Tempted though.
It's kind of like a development shop.
Yeah.
20 years ago.
I got a crisp $1 bill.
I have to step up.
Thursday Night Thunder. I was getting home to watch football, and